minute the UK and the US, is mentioned, I always associated it with massive killings, massive intervention in politics. If you like go back to even Israel's history, India and Pakistan, the African colonies, the Americas, etc. You can the list would go on and on. A litany of bloodshed, a litany of massive killings, all the way to today's massive killings. There is one mass shooting practically every day in America since 2013. This is not figments of fear, as figments of the imagination. There are 3 robberies every 60 seconds. Every minute there's a robbery in the United States. Not to mention the food lines that they have and the homelessness problem, the unemployment issue. So you really wonder if these countries are capable of bringing about world peace, because it seems like everywhere they go, they leave a trail of millions of lives lost, livelihood, opportunities, futures, kids, men, women. These are not military personnel dead. These are massive, whether mistakenly or what they call collateral damage, are lives, collateral damage. But this is the kind of rhetoric, this is the kind of language that they want us to get used to. And that's fearsome. It's really, really hair-raising fearsome. And I'm glad that ASEAN, and I hope the Philippines continues to be a member of ASEAN and think like ASEAN. And I'm just happy to know that it's some kind of a maybe calming, for a split second, calming feeling that ASEAN saying, hey, what are you doing here? What's their business sending your ships here? This is our backyard. We're not in your backyard. I don't know, unless I'm totally deluded into thinking that are there really Chinese ships in the Gulf of Mexico? Are they parked somewhere under San Francisco Bay? What are they doing here? That's one question. And why are we grateful? I hope that somebody will invent a missile, a warhead that says Philippines is off limits. Huwag kayo mag-target dyan, ha? Doon lang kayo sa your games are your games. Don't involve us. We don't want to die from getting hit by a nuclear warhead. And we got to wise up to all this, and we also have to wise up to the fact that these people up here in this level are talking with forked tongues. You'll now never know whether they're telling you the truth or not. They went to Iraq. The US went to Iraq supposedly because they are stockpiling weapons of mass destruction. 20 years later, they're still looking for any weapons of mass destruction. That you are looking for weapons of mass destruction, try Vietnam. Almost 6 million lives were lost in Vietnam, but because they're not white lives, who's apologizing for the 6 million dead in Vietnam? And what? The United States left with a tail between their legs, lost the war. So what was it all about? You talk about Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and name it. I was informed that there are about 500 US military bases all over the world, and they have maybe 500 food lines going on. So what's the logic? You want to promote peace and you're dropping bombs every few minutes, and you've got hungry people of your own kind. So a nation, a country that cannot take care of its own people, you expect them to take care of the world? Wait a minute. They said that in Afghanistan, how many hundreds of thousands of civilians may have been killed, affected, or but let's go back a little further. The Philippine-American War, they treated the Filipinos like rabbits, like it's a rabbit hunt. The howling wilderness. You want that again here? And we're not thinking of what they can do in the future. We're already looking at what they have done. It's a blood trail. My dearest friends are Americans. We text each other still. They're in fear, they're in fright. So it's not a personal thing. It's not a US people. Their people are probably just as ignorant as anyone else about what their own country is doing. And if you go back to the pronouncement of all the presidents, regardless of political party, you will see that kind of aggression, that kind of hawkish, feel prevails.
This AUKUS military alliance, it's a new military alliance, and the new arms deal that was secretly negotiated, a stab in the back of France, as Macron said. First of all, I see that this new development has many interlocking issues, but I don't need to dwell with many of them. The first issue is that the the arms deal, the new arms deal that favors Australia in terms of equipping Australia, supplying Australia with new submarines, nuclear-powered submarines, which has the potential of developing the capability of arming it with nuclear weapons. So hindi lang ito nuclear power, kundi nuclear weapons capability is against international law. It is against international law because it is against the comprehensive ban treaty on nuclear weapons, not to develop nuclear weapons, and also the non-proliferation treaty, both of which were signed a few decades ago. Closer at home, this new arms deal is in contravention of the ZOPFAN, no? The Treaty of Southeast Asia, declaring Southeast Asia as a zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality, and prohibiting the manufacture and proliferation of nuclear weapons in the at least in the Southeast Asian region. So it is in direct violation. So I was wondering why Secretary Locsin would issued a statement a few days ago favoring the AUKUS military alliance and the arms deal. No? So that's one point. The second point that I would like to add is that indeed it will trigger a new arms race, not only in the region but throughout the world. No? There's a new arms race, and this in fact signifies that a new type of Cold War has already begun. A Cold War that aims to target China. The aim of the arms deal and the AUKUS, although they did mention the name explicitly, is obviously China. And as some Southeast Asian nations said, like Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore, and some scholars who reacted to this new development, it will not deter China from, defending itself against the new Cold War by possibly developing new arms, including nuclear arms for defensive purposes. So that is the result of this irresponsible AUKUS treaty on arms deal. Why is China the target of this new military alliance and a new arms deal? I think this is nothing new because China has been the target of the US and its Western allies since I think the 1990s, and uh, more so in the last 10 years when China began to rise as the second largest economic power, together with its developing its military capability commensurate to its economic capacity or economic capability. Why is China being targeted? Uh, I think I'd like let us make clear that China, of course, because of the rise of China, this is panicking, causing panic not only to the US but also to its Western allies. It is posing challenge to the global hegemony of the US. Even if China has reiterated quite several times that it has no intention or ambition of replacing the US as the global hegemon, which I believe so. So this is quite alarming, especially to us Filipinos. It is alarming to Southeast Asia. This new Cold War is alarming, and this is the reason why I think I'll just conclude my opening. This is the reason why we need to revisit or review the Visiting Forces Agreement. You know that we have a Visiting Forces Agreement which is controversial not only with the US but also with Australia, uh, called SOFVA, SOFVA, or Status of Visiting Forces Agreement with Australia, which was signed by the two countries back in 2007, ratified, I think, 5 years later by the Philippine Senate. Thus, we ourselves uh, bear the burden, which is also faced by China, of being encircled by this new Cold War, being threatened by this proliferation of nuclear weapons in our region. So it's about time that we speak up. It's about time that we review. We come out with a strong voice against this new Cold War because it will affect our own development when what we desire together with our ASEAN member countries is peace and development. We don't need new threats. We don't need new dangers. We need to be at peace. Just leave us alone because we want to develop our country. We are in the midst of pandemic. We haven't recovered. We are still faced with the raging pandemic. I think for another 2 years. Okay, so that's my concluding remark, Willie.
We were engaged with the other international media. We were interviewed also on this matter. Let me read the more important parts, and I have my timer in front of me. The focus of the Asia Pacific region, particularly ASEAN with China, had been surmounting the COVID-19 crisis and preparing for the post-pandemic economic recovery. Geopolitics had been set aside as all issues amongst the regional partners have been resolved through dialogue and negotiations. Even relations between the superpowers were easing as President Joe Biden phoned President Xi Jinping early September, which ended in a conciliatory tone. Out of the blue, on September 16, 2021, the calm and tranquility of the region and global situation was rocked by Cold War actions and rhetoric, again from a new defense alliance called AUKUS that carried with it a contract for 8 nuclear submarines for Australia. And the contract was stolen from under the French. East and West had been simultaneously upset by the AUKUS alliance and deal. Of ASEAN's major South China Sea stakeholders, two spoke up against the AUKUS, expressing concern over the arms race it will surely drive. Indonesia's Jokowi Widodo and Singapore's Lee Hsien Loong expressed a degree of wariness, while the rest kept a neutral silence, except the Philippine Secretary Teodoro Locsin, with a convoluted, quote, balance of power, unquote, mumbo-jumbo, justifying the fawning support for the destabilizing AUKUS, flouting the overwhelming sentiment of the ASEAN members. Locsin claims, quote, enhancement of a near abroad allies' ability to project power should keep the balance rather than destabilize, unquote, the situation. He is either blind or simply insensitive to the immediate impact of the AUKUS, as ASEAN expresses deep anxiety, and France with Europe expressed fury over the AUKUS, quote, betrayal, unquote, and China has immediately declared Australia, unquote, adversary, unquote, while charging the AUKUS as, quote, irresponsible and provocative, both in quotes. Malaysian elder statesman Mahathir Mohamad has declared that the AUKUS Defense Alliance has escalated the risk of armed conflict in the region, unquote. Malaysian Defense Minister Hishamuddin Hussein quickly planned a China visit to hold consultations with counterparts there about the AUKUS pact. Locsin has set up the Philippines to be a laughing stock on this AUKUS issue, with China charging Locsin for, quote unquote, ignorance, and non-US media portraying Locsin as a usurper of ASEAN's voice. The AUKUS is justified by Western sources as a mere business project, and ASEAN and China are overreacting. The US-UK defense industry stealthily grabbed the French contract to replace in an income stream or income streams from the Afghanistan and Middle East conflicts the US is withdrawing from. On the other hand, this must be seen in the context of, quote unquote, Asia pivot, moving 60% of US military forces to, quote unquote, again, contain Asia's rise. And I use Asia, not China's rise, but Asia's rise, because we are all rising with China. Certainly not just China and the heightened US militarization of the Asia Pacific. I have 2 more minutes. Locsin's misleading shines through in his statement, quote, absent actual presence of nuclear weapons, we cannot infer violations of the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapons Free Zone Treaty. The issue, if he studied it, is nuclear submarines are fueled with, quote unquote, enriched uranium, which can be quickly converted to weapons use. This is the problem bedeviling the deal now. It will constitute violations of the ASEAN Zone of Peace, Freedom, and Neutrality, ZOCPAM, and the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We call on the Duterte administration to take action to rectify the serious error of Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin and restore ASEAN consensus on the issue of the AUKUS and its nuclear submarine deal, assuage the sensibilities of our ASEAN neighbors, and, quote unquote, comprehensive strategic cooperation partner, China. Restore calm and balance to the Asia Pacific and denounce the AUKUS as an instrument of, quote unquote, Cold War escalation and containment of the rise of Asia.